All right. I hope today, of all days, given what we're going to talk about, you appreciate how much that last 60 seconds matters in the life of our church and in you being you. This is the last Sunday of 4, where we have, as the chairs illustrate, kind of turned our attention on each other and who we are as a church and who we want to be as a church. And if you were here the first week of the series, which was the first Sunday in April, one of the things that we prayed would happen, one of the things we anticipated would happen, is that God's Spirit would make His leading for us, His wisdom to us, His plan for us very clear to us, or at least the foundation of it that we can build upon. And I hope you have that sense today as well. Today, my hope is you will see how all the pieces fit together and give us a starting place from which to build. As a reminder, here are some things, biblically speaking, that are indicative of how God's Spirit speaks to His people. You should expect that when He speaks to us, He'll speak to us in the same way. He's going to build on what has been true for us in our past and our present. Rarely does He ask us to do something that is out of joint with the journey that we've been on so far. He's going to bring us to a place of choice, always does. But we have the opportunity to say yes or the opportunity to say no. He very well may surprise us with some of what He wants us to do or the choices that He wants to make. Don't be alarmed if some of what we find or some of what we talk about as a church now or in the months going forward from here surprises you. That's an indicator that God's Spirit has been involved in the process. We expect God's Spirit to speak. That's why, for those of you who have been here for the series, that's why this candle's lit. The flame is a symbol of God's Spirit that is here even at the moment, working among all of us who are united together as His people, as one community of faith called RiverTree Church. I want to start today with this proverb that I hope now you either know by heart or you at the very least have come to appreciate. Because in its simplicity, there is tremendous spiritual power. So Solomon collects this proverb 3,000 years ago, and there are several more like it in the Proverbs. And he writes very simply, we as human beings make our plans, but the Lord directs our steps. Nothing wrong with you and I making plans, making decisions, figuring out how we want the next 3 months or 12 months or 5 years to go. But He assures us and reminds us, no, just take to heart, you can make all the plans that you want, but it is God Almighty who is going to direct your path or your steps. Now, if you've had a relationship with God or your eyes have been open in your life to this truth, I suspect that you have seen this already happen in your life, in both big ways and even, the more you pay attention, in small ways, day to day. How have you seen that? Here's a big way that came to mind for me that I have seen this in my life. When I was in my mid-20s, I finished my master's degree, and I, at the time, was planning to be a professor. And so, in order to do that kind of occupation, you need to go get a doctoral degree. So I was planning to get a PhD. And all of my professors in graduate school were kind of pushing me to go to a very prestigious overseas school in Scotland. And now I look back on it and think, gosh, I would have loved to have lived in Scotland for 5 years. You have to understand, I'm half Scottish, so I mean, like, it would have been like going home, and I could have worn a kilt, and you could have all seen my hairy tattooed legs. But I didn't. Right. You're welcome, Candace. I didn't. for several reasons, and not really for anything that was real big. I stayed in Dallas, which was where I had done my master's degree. I stayed at the same school, so I could do my doctorate there. Well, then, lo and behold, no more than 6 months later, this belle from Houston, Texas, shows up at our graduate school in Dallas. And I completely ignored her for 6 months. Then I helped tutor a year. Then I helped tutor her in her classes, being the benevolent doctoral student that I was. Whether or not she needed it, that's right. And lo and behold, what I found out is that less than 2 years later, the reason God wanted me to stay in Dallas, the reason He guided my steps in a way that I didn't see coming, is He wanted me to meet my wife. It was a lovely example for me, a big example of Him taking my plans, changing them, but ultimately guiding my steps in such a benevolent, kind way. But see, it happens in a much more smaller way than that, too. I'll give you another example. It really does happen on a daily or weekly basis. So very recently, I got a call from my boss at my night job, and he needed me to work extra time, which I don't usually like a whole lot, because it's hard to balance my two jobs. But he said, man, you got to bail me out here. He doesn't have a whole lot of other help, so I did. Not what I planned. I did not want to be at my night gig for several extra hours that particular night. Except that one of the other employees there, unbeknownst to me, was going through an extraordinarily difficult personal crisis and really didn't have anybody else to lean on, and nobody really knew about it. But he knew that I'm a pastor, and so he took it upon himself to come and bend my ear and lean on me for half an hour of that evening's shift. Yeah, God knew what He was doing. He guided my steps. I suspect you have stories like that too. There is great comfort in this very basic biblical premise that God is the one who guides our steps, sometimes in accordance with our plans and sometimes not. What do you think it takes to live out this principle in your life as a Christian person? Doesn't it take flexibility? You have to hold on to your plans, even the ones you cherish the most, the things you want to have happen the most in your life. You have to hold them with loose reins, because you're not sure when God may come along and redirect you in a way that you didn't anticipate. The only way that this function, this dynamic, breaks down in your life is when you say no. God is always going to be trying to guide your steps. That's just how He is. He is that good-natured and that wise. You can continue to say no to Him, and He will continue to work in your life to get you on the path that He has for you, the path that is best for you and His kingdom and the world around you. But really, you can thwart Him short term, and the only way you can do it is to say no. Now, why would you say no when God wants to redirect your steps? Here's one reason. You don't trust Him with the new direction that He's pointing you. Your plans make sense to you. You've worked it out in your head. The new way He wants to lead you may not. And so you have to trust Him more to go the new direction than to stay on the old path, correct? Here's another one. If I may quote St. Ignatius of Loyola, you have to want the life God gives you, not the life you thought you wanted. You need to listen to that and take that to heart. You have to want the life God gives you, not the one you thought you wanted. Your plans represent the life you think you want. Your favorable outcome for your life as a family, in your career, whatever it happens to be. You have made plans. You know where you want them to take you. It's the life you want. And sometimes that is the enemy to the life God wants for you. Want the life he gives you. Want the life that he is moving perhaps in a new direction. If you can't do that, then you have the potential to throw a roadblock into this entire process. Now here's the thing. God also says that among his people, and namely in the cases of the example verses up on the screen, in his church, so among a group of people like us who are gathered together as a family of faith, he makes the same kinds of claims, that he is always at work. He was always in our midst, shaping us and building us. We just have to pay attention to it. Oftentimes we fixate on the things that we don't like or the things that seem to be amiss. We don't pay attention to God's Spirit being active and what he is doing, what he is building. The question is not whether or not God is active in his people, in this case, our church, doing something, moving us somewhere, building something, constructing something. The question is instead, are you paying attention to what's going on? And will you get on board with what he's already doing? And of course, you can thwart this process the same way you can the principle in Proverbs 16:9 in your own life. Are you willing to have enough faith to believe that he can take you where he's pointing you as a church family? Or are you going to shrink back in fear? Will you not have enough courage to go where he wants to take you? Are you willing to be the church that he's making, not the church you thought you wanted? Just like in your own life, it works the same way. Will you take who you are, the strengths his Spirit is building, will you embrace it and own it and love it, instead of saying to yourself, yeah, but I wish we were this way instead? God's Spirit is at work in his church just like he is in your life. Always at work, always building. You are his field. He is cultivating his field. You are his building. He is putting up 2x4s and drywall as we speak. It's going on already in our very midst. How will we open our eyes and our hearts to see what's already happening? Now see, these are great ideas. In fact, these are very powerful ideas that have the potential to shape your spiritual experience in such a profound way if you let them. But they can stay theoretical. And that's what we don't want to have happen. Because for us as a church, we want to get on board with what God is already doing in our midst, what he is already making us. So let's not just talk about the principle, let's be specific. This is why you did some of the work that you did earlier this month in this series, so that we can actually talk very specifically about how you yourself see God at work in our midst and what that means about our future together. This is where I hope light bulbs go on and eyes are opened. This is where I hope you have an aha moment. This is where I hope you begin to feel your own passion for what God is doing here rise. This is where I hope you begin to take more personal responsibility and ownership for what God is already doing in our midst. So, on the blue sheets, by the way, on your chairs today, there is a more lengthy write-up of some of the things that I'm going to present to you today. And we'll talk more about that blue sheet at the end of the service. But I want to call your attention to some of the things that you yourself observed, what you yourself as a church said about the church that God is leading and God is building because of, or sometimes even despite of, the plans that we have made for years together. When I asked you where you see God most active in the life of our church, what you see as our spiritual strengths, this is what you told me. There's not an editing problem between number 1 and number 2. That space is intentional. The single most mentioned strength, not surprisingly to me, that you yourself identified of us as a church is our love your neighbor mission and the way we try to live that out. In, for instance, some of you said how we prioritize our money and free it up for you to use to help neighbors here and around you. That was the one that you said most of all. The next set, from 2 to 6, were mentioned by anywhere between a quarter and a third of you. And there was really no differentiation between them. That's why they're all together in a set. As you read those things, you should sense, yeah, that is who we are. Yeah, that is our divine fingerprint. This gets it right about what God is building here because I've observed it myself. I've experienced it myself. One person in noting number 2, that you and we together are a very warm and relational and welcoming group. I love the way they put it on their survey. They said, we actually like each other. Which is true, right? And for those of you who have years, perhaps decades of church experience, that is not always the case. And it is not always the case across generations or across socioeconomic classes like it is here. You do actually like each other. You are warm and welcoming. You are a safe and accepting place for all comers. For a small congregation, you are extraordinarily diverse. And you like it that way. And you see that it is something that God is doing here. Good. The New Testament tells me that we're on the right track because that's part of what a New Testament church looks like too. Full of Jews and Gentiles, slaves and free, men and women, and even barbarians in their midst, Paul says. And they were all unified together as a community of faith. Some of you said the way that you see God very active here, what you see God building us into is a church that cares about the right things. The right things rise to the top of the list. We prioritize the right things, and we don't care about non-essential or small things. Good for you. I agree. I hope you love that part of what God is building here. This too, if you have any measure of church experience, isn't always the case. Sometimes non-essential things rise far too high on that list of things that churches care about. Strong relationships, our small groups, were mentioned over and over again as the glue that holds our church together. I'm not surprised by that. Those of us who serve on the steering team of our church, the church oversight team, we sense that too. And we thought this is what you'd say. And sure enough, you did. That so much of what goes on here is localized in our group life. It's fantastic. It's exactly how church should be. When you look at this list, you should feel like that's right. But moreover, you should feel like, oh yeah, that's what God's been up to. This has been the point of the journey that we've been on together, is to get us to this. Who knows if 10 years ago, if this church had done the same work together, if everyone had had a voice together, if our list would have looked like that. I doubt it. And that's no offense to the church of 10 years ago, but this is where God has been taking us. I want you to like that list. Liking it is important. But moreover, you need to own it. You need to take personal responsibility for what God is creating us to be. And it's that. And so now we together have to figure out how to be more of what you see up there. Not surprisingly, by the way, when I asked you a similar question, which is, why do you personally call our church home? Those same strengths showed up a little out of order. It's about the people. It's about the atmosphere and the priorities of our church. It's about that acceptance and that grace, etc. It's about our love your neighbor mission and really meaning it and investing in people and not just throwing money at problems. Sure. That's why you call RiverTree home. I want you to remember those two lists because I want to go kind of down to the next level on them and pass along some insight that will help us know as a church going forward how to use those strengths and that list. They are the foundation upon which we will continue to build. Here are some things to keep in mind as you think about those strengths which are also on your blue sheets. It's actually a good thing that we didn't have any one strength completely dominate the others. You are not a single issue church. You do not have a signature strength, right? If you remember the list, there are actually 6 things that were mentioned by anywhere between a fourth to a third of us, and one of them was mentioned by almost half. This is a good thing because now we have a set of things to build on, not just one. RiverTree is not just one thing, and we are not just one thing to every person here. Some of you call RiverTree home for different reasons than others. This is a good thing, not a bad thing. We'll talk about that a little more when we get down to number 3 on the list. Some of the things you said about yourself, you need to recognize, are actually very typical of small churches. If we were to do the work to get in conversation with other area small churches or small churches nationally, you would find that some of their people would say the same things about their life. Small churches are defined by relationships. Small churches at their best are this large extended family where there are networks of relationships back and forth, where you know a lot of people and they know you. So on Sunday morning, it's not just about a sermon or the music. It's about connecting with people. This is why people choose small churches. This is why over half of all American believers go to a church of 150 people or less, because they want that experience. We all understand the limitations of small church. You need to see the strengths of it. The strengths you observed about yourself are the strengths that comes with being this size, and they change if we tripled in size. You're going to reach newcomers through those strengths. You're not going to reach newcomers because we have an awesome website, which I'm sure we will. You're not going to reach newcomers because we offer a ton of programs. Nope. We need to offer enough to do what we want to do. You're not going to reach newcomers because we find a way to advertise the church that works, or somebody donates $10,000 for a marketing campaign. By the way, we're not using it on a marketing campaign if you donate $10,000. In case you were like thinking to yourself this morning, I'd like to drop $10K on my church. Yeah, that's not where it's going to go. Right? That's not why newcomers will come to us. That's not how they will hear about us from you. They will come to us and stick with us for the same reasons you have, because of our strengths. Those strengths that now you see in black and white. There is no guesswork here. They will come to be a part of this family. They will come to experience your warmth and your welcome, your acceptance and your grace. They will come to be a part of a church that cares about the right things and chooses not to get in big disagreements about non-essential things. This is why people will come here. It is not guesswork. And like a small church, it's going to be a life or a family at a time. For a church of our size, you're talking about half a dozen people a year in a typical year. And there is no such thing as a typical year, by the way. One year it will be 10, the next you're going to lose 4. It's just the way it goes. This is how you'll grow if we own this, and if you take responsibility for this. And the last one may not seem important, but it may be actually the most important of the four. Some of you, and I'm glad you have talked to me or others on the steering team about some of the weaknesses our church has right now. And we do. We have deficiencies or limitations, absolutely. Or you've talked to us about ways that you'd like to see certain ministries expand or grow. Awesome. These are good things to note. Here's what you have to know. Those expansions need to happen. Those weaknesses will be shored up when we learn how to leverage our strengths toward our weaknesses. The way those weaknesses will stop being weaknesses is if we use those strengths that we now know we have toward those places that we think our church is weakest. If there's a ministry we want to grow or expand, guess what? The way we need to do it is to take those 6 strengths and figure out how to use them toward those things we feel are limited or not substantial enough. This is crucial for you to get. The way you build and the way you grow as a church is to leverage your strengths. Use them toward the things you want to see improve. Make sense? You need to get the principle, even if you're not sure how to apply it yet, because trust me, in the next 6 months, we're going to use it over and over again. We're going to leverage our strengths in order to flourish even more across the board as a church. Now, I wanted to do that quick enough so that you have a chance to respond, as we have done every week of this series. If you responded and I assessed what you said correctly, that right there should be the church you know. That should be the church you love. That should be how you see God active here. It should be the thing you appreciate most, that you want to protect the most. This should be how you see our church too. I'd love to know, just sitting there listening to me talk for the last 20, 25 minutes, I'd love to know what your reaction to this is. Maybe what it makes you hope for our church as we move forward. Maybe you want to echo some of those strengths up there or tell us why you personally appreciate them or why you know others would. Why don't you take a minute and talk to each other? Don't just listen to me about it, about the church that God is already making, to which we just need to say yes. Would you raise your hand and we'll listen to one another for a little while. All right. Linda, will you pass this back to Chris? Or there you go. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, I actually, just within the last couple days, had a really harsh experience that exemplifies why I love this church for these things. Without getting too much into it, and hopefully I won't make this a rant, I got into a Facebook discussion on Christianity and a certain issue about transgendered people. And the dialogue that had been going on in the group was just, in my opinion, disgusting and hateful and all this stuff. And I tried to give a differing opinion of loving your neighbor even though they're different, and was extremely verbally harassed and extremely attacked by people who focus so hard on things that aren't essential, that don't matter, that Christ didn't talk about. And it was a harsh reminder that not everyone focuses on these kind of things, and us who come from churches that focus on dotting every I and crossing every T and making sure that you've got your tithe in it's the exact amount, because that's what will get you to heaven, right? As it's just hearing all this today and everything, it's again why I love this church and why I come here, is because we focus on these things and the things that matter most.
Sure. Sadly, things like the transgender issue, it's so complex and confusing to people. But what it does in churches is polarize people. Church is the last place you'd ever talk about that, right? Why? Why are we not the first place that we can talk about that even people who don't understand it or don't agree with it. Why can't we do that? You need to see what Chris said. You've made the choice to be a place like that, where we all don't have to agree about it, but we're safe with each other. And we can talk about the hardest things or the most contentious things. You should love that about you too. Somebody else. Why don't you respond to what you've learned about you or what people have? Oh, the back. Will you, Mark, hand that back to Wayne?
So I'll go back to when we were in the old building over there. And I remember someone saying that when we were coming to this new building, that the people who cared more about our mission are the ones who came here. Not just, oh, I go to church every Sunday, let's just go. But the people who cared about our mission and the way that we want to do church are here. And the people who were warm and welcome to me when I first joined the church over there are the same faces I see here. But I don't see any faces missing except for people I know, and I know why they're somewhere else, and it's not because of this church, it's because of jobs or some other thing they've moved and whatever. So the warm faces I remember from there, I still see here. There is one thing that I really love that we used to do is every once a month we used to get together and do potlucks and dinners together, and that would be great to use this space that we have till 2 o'clock.
Sure.
So if we can bring that back, that'd be great.
We would, that would fit very well with that church up on the screen if we would embrace that. Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. Somebody else? How does this resonate with you? This should seem deeply right to you. Candace, go.
Oh, now? Okay.
Yeah, right, sorry.
Can you shut up, please? I have the microphone. No, one of the things that came to mind was just that, do we still have access to that block party trailer?
We do.
Yeah, just that we should do that more often. And it should be like a friendly suggestion from the church.
Sure.
We haven't done that in a while, so who's going to do it this time? You know, kind of get on a rotating schedule, because that fits with our mission, and it's a outreach thing where we can come and say, like I would say to my Grove, hey, we're doing a block party thing. It may be at my house, but we're all doing it. And then they invite their friend, you know. So.
Yep. It's almost free to us. It's like this fantastic resource that costs us almost nothing through our denomination. So yeah, that'd be great to do. And it's certainly having the Groves do it would fit with how our church functions anyway, which is that we really are a church made up of small groups, which is how it should be. Somebody else, what do you appreciate about this? What are you Dan, or are you pointing at somebody? Who? Bruce. Oh, yeah, I know what Bruce is going to say. So I think, because we were talking about it this morning. Right. Right. Thank you. Right. Right. Help out the legally blind pastor. That's right. Go ahead, Bruce.
We've looked at the outreach through the Barnabas Project. We've talked of how we help each other, we help our friends. We've also, in a way, become a worldwide reach through Edwin in Uganda. Mm-hmm. He started by looking at our website, talking about the Barnabas Project. Now I see he's drawing from Europe. He's now in Australia drawing. A little spark that started here has grown. In some ways, like Paul's conversion on a road led to Christianity being spread worldwide. We may not be doing the traveling, but we were a spark that helped.
Right. That's a great observation, Bruce. Speaking of a time we had, as a church, we had the opportunity to say yes to a surprise, and look at what's happened because we said yes. Amazing. You're right. You're right. Somebody else. It's important that you hear from each other about why you think this is right and how it resonates with your soul, about not just who we are, but where we're headed. Oh.
Hi, baby.
My Belle from Houston is going to talk.
I want to talk about number 6. I'm kidding. Come on.
Right. It'll be the first time that you talk about number 6.
I've talked to number 6 a couple times this week. I think that some of us have been here for a long time, and we saw a lot of growth and pain, and in the most healthy way, we have brought that forward with us. And I think that that attracts people who've been through times of pain. I think that we are all still comfortable saying, wow, that was really hard. Or when Wayne said moving to this building, he acted like it was the greatest thing in the world. That was a really difficult time in the life of this church and for me. And I remember talking to someone about it, and they said, wow, it is so obvious that you are a truly broken person. And I went, well, thanks. And they said, and you know, the funny thing about that is that's who God likes to use. And so I think whether you've been here way longer than me or whether you've been here for a year, there is honestly something about walking into this church with all of our past hurts and with the curveballs that God has done on our path and us making plans that he's totally messed up. And I hope that you can even think of people who've just been here for a couple of years who feel so incredibly comfortable because we're a church who's been through some changes, and they walk in and they have hurts and they feel really comfortable bringing them with them. Am I way off base? No. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
You weren't.
I don't think.
The whole praise team hasn't talked yet.
Right, yeah, I know. We're the extroverts, right? So I don't think that we were that church when we were in the old building. And I think maybe through all of that pain and whatever, it's like what you were talking about at the beginning, that God had a plan all along to make us, help us, not make us, well, you know, anyways, help us become that kind of church, because that's what we wanted to be all along, but we couldn't be in that building. And so I think we had to go through that because this was his plan for us all along. So
I would, other people may have experienced it, differently. Here, for those who go back that far, when you're under as much stress, personally, or as a church, as a network of relationships, it's almost impossible to be these things. That's what you have to see. This takes emotional energy and work. This takes relational investment, and you can't do that in a really stressed environment. Okay? And I'm not demeaning anything of where we've been as a church, because it would be true of any church or any person you know who is going through a season of really heightened stress. It's almost impossible for them to do this. But see, now that we don't have those worries or stresses anymore, now we can focus on the things that matter, and we have the energy to do it. That's what's key. Okay? Mike.
One of the things that I like about it is I've directed somebody to the Love Your Neighbor mission. And it wasn't like, it was enough for an eye-opener. I think they were, I don't know if they were a practicing Christian at the time or not, and it doesn't matter, but they were able to see that it worked through God. And the part I like about the church is being warm and welcoming, is that I've had friends that I don't know if they came or not and just happened to be an off week or not showed up at all, but it was nice to go that I could invite them to church, and they're like, well, I don't know about, because I don't know what they think of me or this or that. And it was nice to be able to honestly say that it doesn't matter at our church. They welcome people. You'll fit in fine. It doesn't, they won't judge. And it feels good to be able to invite somebody, whether or not they show up, and honestly feel like it's not going to be a burden on them. They're going to feel awkward,
right,
or anything like that.
Thank you for saying that, Mike. I want as your pastor, I want you to know I believe that. There's almost nobody I come in contact with that I would not feel comfortable inviting to come here. Not because of me, but because of you. Rachel.
Yep, I'm going to actually expand on that a little bit. When I first came here, I don't know, lots of years ago, I had been going through kind of like a spiritual questioning period where, you don't really know if you fit at church. You don't really know if you have faith or how strong it is. And one of the things that I really loved about this church right off the bat was a lot of times with a newcomer or with somebody who's been burned by church, when the tithe baskets come around, you don't know if you're supposed to give or not. And I love that we make it clear that if you're new here, if you're not a Christian, that's okay. You're welcome. We have no expectations of you, and you can just sit and be here at your own comfort level. If you want to sit in the back and not say anything to anybody, that's okay. And if you want to be up front singing, or if you want to like greet everybody at the front of the door, that's cool too. And I feel like that's really important for the kinds of people that we're reaching out to, new Christians or non-Christians, or people who are really confused about their faith because there's so many difficult issues that we disagree about. You can come here and not know, and that's okay. You can come here and not really know if you're a church person, and that's okay. We'll love you anyway. And I feel like that's so important. It's something that really is missing out of a lot of churches because there are so many expectations at other churches. So that's one thing that I really love about this church and that I think we really need to hold on to.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. You know, the cool thing is, a lot of what Rachel said, the specific example she used, this will prove the point of that proverb that I referenced at the start of the message. Those were decisions that were made very early on in RiverTree's life. I didn't make them. Pastor Keith did, who founded this church. And they still live on today. They are a part of our story, the good choices that he made. I think we probably have time for maybe one more. Somebody else wants to say how you see this really defining who our church is and what God is constructing us to be, etc. Fred, thank you, brother.
I've thought about this for a while. The strengths we listed give me hope that this kernel of truth about us will allow us to survive as a small church. It seems to me it's the bedrock of where we are, and we have to keep and nurture it. There's a few steps moving ahead that I feel strongly about. One is that we need to grow more leaders in the church in terms of training and educating and giving them experience, including the newcomers who come. There's a precious few of us active leaders, and we don't want to wear each other out, right? So welcome to whoever wants to learn and experience that blessing. I agree totally that we need to keep close to our Barnabas Project roots here as in our local version of it and overseas. And Brian Pickett, myself, and Ryan Sisko continue to work on that at least monthly in conversation with lots of activity. Let's keep that going. I'm concerned that our level of stewardship channels our ministry in certain ways. And I expect it could be better.
Okay.
Better stewardship could give us more options for ministry. And
Sure.
I don't have a total solution. I just would like to have that conversation.
Sure.
Right. Last, I think that I've learned through helping to lead classes the last couple of years that most newcomers to the faith come through relationships. So we're poised to do that on the scale that fits us. But most of the newcomers to church, our kind of church, comes through church plants, hundreds of them per year. And I think we should align our efforts at our church more closely with the class's church multiplication efforts. Partnering with new plants, for instance, would be a wonderful thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big believer. That's part of why we do what we do with the branch church, is because small churches, because of some of their limitations, work best when they partner together. So I would hope that we would continue to do that too and work on more of those things. Let's, music team, why don't you take the stage? And we want to mark the end of today. And real